What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of StewTube. It is September the 9th, and today I'm going to do things a little different. I'm going to actually start with the Ethereum chart, and then, of course, I will be hopping over to the Bitcoin chart and giving you my input on that. We're also going to take a look at the US dollar index just to make some interesting comparisons. And if you guys think that sounds interesting, give me a thumbs up, smash that like button, subscribe if you hadn't, and with that, let's jump into it. Alright guys, starting with Ethereum, I'm on the 15-minute chart here, and you guys know in my video last night I pointed out this falling yellow resistance line, and I made the comment that I was interested in putting in a bit of a long snipe with Ethereum if we were to get a close above that line. And that's exactly what I did not too long after the video. I think it was just a few hours after I made that video, so that worked out great. So what I was looking for is I had pointed out that we got a whole bunch of touch points along this trend line here. Continued to get them over the course of the night. And as well, we had 3 touch points along this green line here, which took us out of this, I don't know if you want to call it a wedge or a triangle pattern, whatever. It's just a basic trend line in my opinion. But either way, we had this upward trend line that had 3 touch points and blasted us out through that. I felt like that was good enough confirmation to get in a bit of a long position there. So you can see here that I have reached 2 of my targets. My trade was entered at around $339-ish. I took some profits at $347, and I took more at $358. The reason why I took most of my profits at this $358 mark is because we do have this red resistance line. I don't want to look too bearish on that line, and I'll show you why in a minute here. But I did want to lock in some of my profits because I don't know how much longer, oh sorry guys, how much longer this green upward support trend line will hold. And when that does break, I would not be surprised if we were to retest it as resistance and get a push back down to this green upward support line. I'm going to clean up a few things here and show you what I think is going on. If I change the Ethereum chart to the 4-hour chart, what does that look like to you guys? That's why I don't want to sound too bearish on Ethereum right now, is you guys know, I assume you're very familiar with this pattern, is if we continue to coil up in said pattern, if we get a 3rd touch point along the bottom here, I am going to be looking at this as 1 touch point, 2 touch point, 3 touch point, 1, 2, and 3. And to me, guys, that looks like it could become a very clear ascending triangle. And you guys know that those are generally a bullish pattern. It doesn't have to happen, and you could get a fake out, especially with this whole yellow box right above us. But I would not be too surprised if we get our break above this triangle pattern that we would actually blast through this yellow box and maybe even get some sort of consolidation on it to continue moving to the upside. And I think this would catch a lot of people off guard because so many people are bearish in the community right now. I find that a lot of YouTubers, a lot of people in general, a lot of comments in YouTube videos, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of negativity, and this reminds me a lot of after Bitcoin broke its $6,000 floor and crashed down to $3,000, and everyone thought it was game over, and everyone was calling for prices like $800, $1,500, $1,800, and obviously that never happened, and we rallied really fucking hard up to 14,000 after that. And to me, the sentiment in this market right now feels very similar to that because we had this big scary dump here. Of course, we don't have to be in this triangle. I might be totally wrong on this pattern. We might just break through it as we have done in the past. I know Bitcoin had what I thought was a beautiful ascending triangle not too long ago, and it broke to the downside. So there is always the possibility that patterns don't play out in their favorable conditions. But it's something to definitely keep on the radar, guys, because that could be the kind of reversal that is going to be some very large, long opportunities. We'll have to see how that plays out for us. I'm going to hop over to my macro Bitcoin chart on Bitstamp, guys. And actually, I've pointed out my weekly chart opinion towards you guys so much that I think you guys get where my overall opinion is. So I'm going to zoom in on these purple lines that I have. So I'll go to the daily chart. And there's a couple of reasons I want to watch these lines. One is you can see this support line, which I've also referred to as my bit of a Tesla channel in the past, because Tesla had a very similar price pattern before it broke out. Probably draw it something like that would be the majority of the trading range. So I wouldn't be all that surprised now that we have consolidated along the bottom of this channel once again. Wouldn't be too surprised to see the top of the channel again. And actually, that brings me to where we might exactly hit it would be kind of where this other purple trend line comes from, would be these two wicks here. Just extending that trend line, just something to watch. We might not hit it again. It's not a valid pattern or anything like that, since it only has 2 touch points, but you guys know those are very similar trend lines to what I kind of like to play on the smaller time frame. So I want to watch how the price action reacts to being in this channel as well as below this purple line here. Zooming into the 4-hour on Bitcoin, guys, I still do believe that there's a chance we are in this downward sloping channel here. And if we get to the upside of it and start closing candles above and testing it as support, I think it might be time for Bitcoin to also make a move to the upside. That being said, I'm not necessarily saying the bottom is in, guys, but I'm thinking that there could be some nice long opportunities for at least a bit of a snipe. I think that there's a few levels that could give us some problems. The one good thing is we did have this purple falling wedge line, kind of as I treat them. You can see here we even tested it as a support flip, and since have been kind of in a bit of an accumulation zone. But I think it's only a matter of time until we test a little higher, and even if we only test up to kind of 11,400 sort of an area, you can see here that I have a few different trend lines mapped out. One of them being what I'm going to consider the bottom of this upper level, this upper trading range that we had before we started dumping. And as well, you guys know that I did have this line mapped out on the weekly chart. Sorry, this is going to look real small in the 4-hour, but I had it on the weekly chart, and that's what I was looking for, a support test along, which we just cut through like butter. So it didn't really serve any significance on the way down. It didn't give us any sort of support, but I'm wondering if we might struggle with it as resistance as well. Like I said, there's the bottom of this trading range that lines up pretty well with it, and then not much above that we have this new purple downward sloping line here. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to pull up a Fibonacci from the top, our current local high at 12.5 thousand, and measure down to where we've dumped to so far. I think a couple levels of interest here from a Fibonacci point of view would be around that 10.8K at our 382, and as well as always the 0.618 at around 11.4, 11.5 thousand, somewhere in there. You can see that also matches up with this little trading cluster here that we had just before we took a big dump to the downside there. And 382 kind of where we bounced and retested as support, or sorry, as a resistance there. So we may, again, if we break out of this channel, we might find resistance there, and we might have to hammer at the 382 a few times before we would break through to the 618. And that being said, if this does end up being a very bearish market here, I know I've pointed out before that in a very strong bullish market, you want a retest of your 382 line. Well, the same from a bearish point of view. If it's a strong bearish rally, we'll call it, you could expect a rejection at the 10.8K, even if we break out of this channel. But obviously, guys, none of this is financial advice. Always do your own research, form your own opinions. With that potential getting rejected at those prices. I'm not saying that the market is turning bearish, but I do want to point out once again that there is that gap down at 9,600 that usually tend to fill, does not have to, but there is also that if I zoom out to the weekly chart here, we do have the Fibonacci, speaking of that 382 that I pointed out yesterday. The 382 level, a retrace of this current move that we've had would be around the 9.2 thousand, and I think it's totally reasonable to think that we would get a retest of that, as well as my triangle retest. Just a whole bunch of things really, guys. So that's just why I want to have the bearish scenario on my radar. From a bullish point of view, I'm hoping this channel holds. This purple line extends it. I would like to see this hold as support and then blast us through this red resistance box, and that's when Bitcoin would really take off, in my opinion. But that obviously doesn't have to happen. We could just be ready to dump to the downside. Who knows, with the COVID scares and all that sort of stuff. So yeah. Anyways, guys. Oh, I was going to look at the US dollar index with you guys. That's what I was going to do. If I go on the daily chart here, I think a big reason why Bitcoin and other cryptos have been dumping is because the US dollar was on this little bit of a rally here for the last week or so. You guys can kind of see here by this chart that the US dollar and crypto seems to move opposite of each other. If you wanted to look at it a different way, you could say that Bitcoin or crypto is actually more stable and the US dollar is being volatile around it. Just a different way of looking at it. Either way, they're volatile compared to one another, right? So anyways, we have this downward trend line here, this red line I have mapped out, and so far we are finding resistance there. If that line breaks, we still do have this resistance line from this wick to these wicks here and carrying us down there. If this pattern seems to break to the upside, I think that crypto is going to hurt. I think it's going to crash. Well, maybe not crash isn't the right word, not long term, but I think there could be a volatile move to the downside if this is to break out to the upside. That being said, if this US dollar index drops this support and we break through here and treat this as resistance, that's kind of what happened to the US dollar index last time Bitcoin went for its 20K rally in 2017. Is since it moves the opposite, the US dollar index was dropping like a stone and Bitcoin was just absolutely ballooning. So that's something to consider, guys. Looking at this as the US dollar index may start breaking to the upside. If I zoom out to the weekly here, I'll show you where these green and purple lines come from. This purple line here, this is going to get real small, but you can see that on a weekly chart here, it has served a lot of significance. There's been a lot of touch points from both sides in that general area. And as well, we have this green line, which would be, I guess, from our, I want to say local lows, but this was way back in 2011 when prices were this low. So you can see here that we have our two touch points, 1, 2, extended that trend line, and that's right where we were starting to find support now. I'll zoom back into the hour or the daily chart, and that's exactly where we wicked to on that day, on September 1st. So it would make sense to at least get the bounce as the US dollar did, but will it hold? It's tough to say. There's a lot of pressure coming down. There's a lot of resistance. We could look for some areas of significance on our fib tool there. Maybe get a pump up to 382 or something like that and then get a rejection. If this US dollar index drops this floor here, I think that crypto is absolutely going to take off. But obviously none of this has to happen, and once again, none of this is financial advice. If you guys had a good time listening to this content and think you learned something, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, what you like, what you don't like, what you agree with, don't agree with. Subscribe if you hadn't. And with that, I'm out. Peace.